when people get way too stoked on a deal, they might get all jazzed on all these like marketing campaigns, and then the deal gets sent and then there's nothing about it in there. And then, the label might be like, yeah, well, of course we're going to market it. It's in our best interest to. But then I'm like, well, if you're actually promising this, then why don't we put this in? Whether it's a minimum $2,000 spend or a minimum $250,000 spend, whatever it may be. I'm like, if you are committing at least this much, let's put it in the deal then.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Headliner Mindset Podcast. Today's guest is a music business attorney who used to be the head of business and legal affairs at Steve Aoki's record label, Dimmock. He now runs his own practice, helping both emerging and established artists navigate the complicated world of negotiating legal contracts, making sure everyone knows what they are signing and are getting a fair deal. This is Arta Majd. My man, welcome to the show. I'm so stoked to have you because you are our very first lawyer that we've had on the Headliner Mindset Podcast. So welcome. Thank you for being here.
I am honored. Thank you for having me. Honestly, this means a lot. Wow, that's really cool. Okay. That's great to know. Yeah, no, I'm so happy to be here. I appreciate the opportunity. I'm really excited. So thank you.
Yeah, it's about time. Like, I've talked to so many artists, we've talked to labels, we've talked to managers, but the lawyer is a very, very important player on the team. And it's somebody that not everybody has. It's kind of like a part of the team that a lot of people don't really add until a bit later, but we also hear all these horror stories of like young artists kind of getting fucked over because they're signing contracts that they don't really know what they mean. So right. I'm really excited to dive into this episode with you where we can, unpack some contract stuff, get into some of the nitty gritty of like the music business and the lawyer side of things. But before we get there, I just want to hear a little bit about your background. Tell me about your history in the music industry and how you ended up becoming a lawyer.
So I was always into music, like from a young age. And as I got older, I feel like there was a lot of like family pressure, right, to do something that is, I guess professional, right? Like that. I'm Persian. There's like this running joke where they're like, if you're a Persian kid of immigrant parents, you have three life paths. You can either be a doctor, a lawyer, or the family failure, right? And so I always told myself from a young age, I was like, man, that's so stupid. Like, I want to be in the arts. I want to be doing creative stuff. Like, I don't want to be sitting in an office. It's so dry and boring. But like, as I got older and I saw like kind of the reality of the music industry, and it's a beautiful thing. I love the music industry, but it really takes a toll on you. And it really takes a lot, whether it's the recording or the touring, all the different things and all the different people, the coming and going. And I was like, I'm a bit of a homebody and I really like reading and writing. And so I was like, what if I can just help people do what they want to do, but still get my creative outlet? Because I mean, as you can see, the stuff is not just collecting dust. I still get to have fun and make music, and I still get to be creative. Like, to me, writing lyrics is like writing a contract. So when I was thinking about all of this and I was like, you know what, I think I want to be a music lawyer. Like, I didn't go into law school not knowing what my path is going to be. From like, before I even applied, I was like, I want to be a music lawyer. And then I got into it. I wanted to sign up for all the music related classes. And then my second year, I actually went and I interned at Dimmock, so Steve Aoki's label. And it was kind of ridiculous because when I showed up, dude, there's like people, they're dressed like, we are. They're like t-shirts and hats and hanging out. I went in a suit, like full suit. Yeah. I had a little briefcase and I went in there and I was like, these guys, there's no way they're going to hire me. Like, this is like, what am I doing? And then they hit me back and they were like, hey, so can you start? And I was like, yeah, of course.
Bro.
And so that ended up, being the beginning of like actually getting into the industry, not just saying I'm going to be a music lawyer. And then I was there for a while. I kind of like worked my way up from like intern to legal assistant to becoming a part of like business and legal affairs to actually heading up business and legal affairs. And then after my time there, I ended up just continuing, I ended up getting really busy and having a lot of clients. So now that I was like established into the industry, I was like, I'm going to go focus more on my own firm. And so that's what I do now. And I cover pretty much everything. Like, if you're a brand new artist, you're starting out, I want to talk to you. If you're already like super established, you're a top 10 DJ, I want to talk to you. So it's a really fun thing. And I feel like I still get to be creative within the contract. So that's cool. Kind of the short version. Yeah.
All right. I love that you came in with a suit and you still got the job, even though, they could have made that decision. Maybe this isn't a cultural fit, because that was the experience that I had. I somehow, right out of college, got a fucking interview with like my dream label, which we were talking about before the show started, Metal Blade Records, like the
dude, there we go. Yes.
legendary record label that put out like every album from every one of my favorite bands. Somehow managed to like find on Craigslist they were hiring. And I was like fresh out of college where they teach you like wear a tie to your interview. And so I go into the label wearing, button up and a tie and everything. And it was so awkward because I was like literally the perfect person for the job. But then coming in there, similarly, everyone's just a bunch of tatted metalheads. And I'm like, oh, fuck, like, what am I doing? And
like the career development office did not prepare me for this.
Yeah, ended up not getting the job. So moral of the story, first lesson of the episode, if you are applying for a job out there in the music industry or really anywhere, like know what the culture is, right? Maybe you don't need to go in with a suit and tie, right? We're kind of taught that, but that's not always the case.
Ask someone, right? In this day, I feel like there's no excuse. Like you can't just DM somebody, be like, hey, I saw you work at Dimmock. That's so cool. Like, what's the vibe
there?
What do you guys wear? Like, what's some like do's and don'ts? Like, if someone asked me that was applying for the job, I would love to share with them. I'd be like, this is what you do. Don't do what I did. It still works somehow. I don't know why, but
safe to say if it's a music industry job, 99% not gonna want to come in a full fucking suit and tie. So, but that's so awesome, man. What a cool journey. Obviously, Dimmock is such a legendary brand, a legendary label. You must have worked with Brian Linares over there, good friend of mine.
I saw.
I did.
He was on the podcast.
Yeah, did an episode with Brian. He used to really help run Dimmock for a long time as well. Really cool episode. You guys can go back and check out Brian Linares from Dimmock. But I'm curious right now because I really want to get into record contracts specifically with you, because there's so many artists that's going to be one of the first things that they're faced with. Everybody, especially, as you're coming up, you're probably aiming to get signed on one of your favorite record labels. And then that day is going to happen where maybe it's not your favorite label, but like a label wants to sign you. And it's really fucking exciting. Like, hell yeah, I'm going to put out a track, got my first record contract. Let's like spend some time picking apart a typical, like single deal. And what are some of the common terms that people should be familiar with, like when they're going through a contract and considering, what to sign? Because I think the problem is most young artists are going to get the contract. They're going to be so fucking excited about it that they're going to be like, I can't believe I got a contract. And they're just going to sign whatever was given to them. And 100%. not even try to negotiate anything, right? And so let's help educate, like, what are some things that you could probably come back and push back on and say, hey, let's change X, Y, and Z. What are some of those things that people want to look out for?
First thing I want to say is it can actually get to be a pretty long list. So I want to start with that. And like, that's part of why I've become more active on social media, right? I'm trying to put out, I'm putting out more videos so that people can kind of see, because it's kind of a very long list.
Yeah, but which I'll say is so great. I got to dig through your Instagram and just like watch a handful of your videos, and you guys go follow Arta. His shit is so good. Really, really good advice on there. So definitely someone you want to be following.
Appreciate you. Thank you. But yeah, I'd say one of the biggest things is when you're talking about like exclusivity. I'm just trying to think about a contract from the top down, right? Like one of the things that they talk about, a lot of things is like term and exclusivity. Like how long is the deal going to go on for, and how long are you going to be exclusive for? And a lot of times people just get so excited. Like you said, it's so accurate. People get so excited by the fact that it's just a record deal that they don't care. They'll just sign it and they'll be in. But I'm like, well, if you're delivering like 12 tracks and it's like dragging out for a really long time, you could be missing other opportunities at other labels at that same time, because like, you might think it's a great look for you to be like having other singles here and there, other collabs. The label could shut it down if you're tied into like an exclusive deal, right? So one way to counteract that is with step outs. So let's say you're exclusive to a label for 12 months or 24 months or whatever. You could negotiate.
Is that a common thing that you see, is that labels are asking artists to be exclusive to them for a certain amount of time?
I feel like it's like loosened up as of like recent, but from like, I've seen some of the like famous music related lawsuits are exactly about that, where you have like an artist that has to deliver like 5 albums or 7 albums or whatever. And until they make these deliveries, they can't go anywhere else or do anything else. And the label might want them to fit a certain sound or fit a certain look. And the artist is like, look, I'm tired of this. Like, I want to try doing this, or I want to try releasing elsewhere. So like one of the ways to fight that is like when you ask for the step outs and you're like, hey, like in that, let's say I do have to give you 5 tracks, 12 tracks, whatever, let's say, for example, in a 12-month period, I want to have the freedom to drop like 2 singles on outside labels or just independent release during that time. So in that way you have a little bit of flexibility, because
Okay.
like one of the scariest things in general with record deals, I feel like, is just getting tied down for too much and for too long.
Yeah.
I know that's a broad statement, but I feel like that's something that some people don't realize the implications of when they actually sign up.
So exclusivity is really the word that we're looking out for, right? Exclusivity meaning that like, okay, you have to exclusively release with us, right?
Yeah.
Now, what I've seen in contracts is usually options. Can you talk about like what's an option? What does that mean? I think a lot of the listeners are getting hit with probably, maybe let's just say it's a single, they're signing a single to a label, but that single contract might also include options. That's usually what I've seen before. What does that mean?
So an option just means that it's like a deal extension, and most often the way it's presented, it's going to be at the label's discretion. So let's say you have a single deal with 3 options, you sign the single with the label, it comes out, it's doing phenomenal, the label loves it, people love it, and then the label's like, all right, we're going to exercise option 1 for another single. So now they exercise that right to just turn this 1 song contract into like a 2 song contract. Let's say that song does really well, they extend again, they exercise the option. And then let's say that one flops. The other 2 have kind of like, fallen off a little bit. They might be like, you know what, we're not going to exercise the 4th option. We can let you out of your deal. But like generally speaking, like it's like if you're doing well, they're probably going to want to keep you around more. If it's not going well, or like let's say the relationship's really like bumpy, they might at that point just choose like, yeah, we're not going to exercise the option. Like you're back to being free.
Got it. So how would it work if I had a single deal and there was an option clause on it? And then let's say I presented the song to them. Hey, here's the next song I'm going to put out. And they're like, yeah, we don't really like that song. Would I be able to go release that song on my own or be able to go release that song with a different label?
Great question. And honestly, there's so many different scenarios that can play out from that. Like they might ask you to revise that track, be like, actually, let's try tweaking some things. They might ask you to send in a different track. But it doesn't necessarily mean that you can just go if it's something that you negotiate for in the deal, like there's something called like first look, where they might say, you send everything to us first. Once we pass, then that becomes a step out. So now you can go release it on a 3rd-party label, as long as you're not like stepping on our toes and getting too close to our release dates. So it's something that can happen. But again, a lot of the deals might just have that first part. You have to send us everything, but not the second, like, oh yeah, and then you can go release it elsewhere. So again, these are things that is worth asking for, negotiating in, so you're not stuck.
So it really comes down to the wording. This is where you have to be like really meticulous about what's actually being said in the contract.
One of the craziest things that I've come across is I've been doing this for years. Most deals that I have seen do not have a release date or a release window. There's so many times people are so stoked to sign to a label and they're like, yeah, cool, let's do it. Even if it is 12 tracks or 24 tracks or 5 options. And then they don't think about it. I'm like, dude, you got to put like a 6 months from now, they got to all be out, or 6 months from delivery, they got to be out, or 12 months. Or if you're dead set on release dates, like you've got your whole year planned out, you might be like, hey, it's got to be December 12th or else, right? Most deals I've seen don't have that. I would say that's a huge thing to be aware of. And if you don't have the set dates, at least ask for that window.
Great point, because when a label is the one giving the contract, the first draft template that they give you is always going to be in their favor. It's in their favor to not have to have the pressure to have a deadline on the release. But this is something that I see on the artist end all the time. One of the big complaints is, okay, I made this song and then it took me 3 months to actually get it signed, or 4 months to get it signed. And then it took them another 6 months or another 9 months to put it out. By the time that song comes out, you wrote it a year and a half ago. You wrote it 2 years ago. The song's coming out, and you're like, I don't even sound like that anymore. That's not even the shit that I'm making anymore. And so a lot of artists come into that trap where they're like, dude, I'm actually not even excited about this song because that whole process has taken so long. So I'm really glad that you bring that up. That was something that I did as a manager. We would always put like a 90-day clause in there of like, okay, cool. From whenever we sign this contract, this song has to come out within 90 days. And that was always something that we negotiated. I forget what do you call that? I don't remember what we called it back then. Just like a release clause.
Just release date or release window. I would say release window. Like,
Yeah.
it has to be,
Super
you can set
important.
it up whatever works for your, for each individual deal.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's almost like a safety net. If I was going to call it not exactly what it's called, I'd say it's a safety net. Make sure you have some kind of safety net built in so that you're not stuck pushing it out and pushing it out. Because there's two scenarios that can happen that are bad. One is just that they keep dragging it out, the song still comes out. But two, I don't know if this happens as much anymore, but like I've heard horror stories of this even before I was a music attorney, where labels would have like competition. So they would sign a competing artist and then they don't even have an intention to really push the artist or get them big. They just want to take the competition off the table. So that every time they get a master, they just be like, yeah, we have more notes. And they just keep dragging it out so that their superstar can blow up without somebody else getting in the way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like technically once you signed the song, they own, and I think it's good for people to understand, like, what are you actually signing when you sign a record contract, right? Like, what is it that you're signing over? You're really signing ownership of that master recording over to the label. You don't own it anymore, right? Really, it's like they own the master. And once you sign it over, if you don't have a release clause, they can technically also not even put the song out. That song could actually never come out, and they own it. And there's nothing that you can do about it. You can't put it out because they own it now.
That's the thing. Like they might pay you and then you've given them a song, right? Contracts, general rule, like there has to be something for something, right? But that's exactly like the tricky part right there. It's like, well, they can be like, well, yeah, well, we paid you. We wanted the song. Where does it say that we have to put it out? Or where does it say we have to put it out while it's relevant?
Yeah.
So
let's talk about getting paid, because I think that's something that a lot of artists don't think about. And I'd be curious, as somebody who's seeing a lot of record contracts come across your desk, on the kind of entry level, perhaps, when people are signing tracks, they're just excited to even be signing it, excited to even be associated with that label. But at some point too, for a lot of labels, I don't think a lot of labels are even worth signing if they're kind of smaller. It's like, if all they're going to do is put it up on Spotify and not really actually push it, you can do that yourself. The whole point of signing with the label is that they're going to actually give it some proper marketing. So I'm curious about, like, what kind of budgets are you seeing? Like, are you seeing labels actually pay and either give an artist in advance, or are they guaranteeing a certain amount of marketing budget in these contracts? Like, are you seeing that often? And what might that look like for, let's say, a DJ that's signing a single to a label? Are they actually getting money from labels is what I'm curious about.
some definitely are. There's definitely a phrase that a lot of lawyers use. They say it depends a lot. And I don't want that to be my first response, but the truth is it depends. Because I've seen a good chunk of deals too where it's just royalty based, right? Where like you're not getting any money up front. But to your point, these are things to watch out for. Like, one, if you are getting advance, sometimes an advance seems really amazing until you realize that it says it's due after everything's turned in. So if you're having to pay, vocalists or producers or for studio time or all this stuff, and then they're not going to pay you until it's like done, dusted, and turned in. Well, that might be kind of tough for someone who's not on tour, and they might need to pay rent next month. You know what I mean? And the month after.
You're paying for all of those costs out of your pocket up front, and then basically the label's paying you back later.
Yeah. And so, and the other thing too, advances are just more or less, fee, if someone says we're giving you a fee, like I've seen vocalists sometimes they'll be like, I want this lump amount, it's not recoupable. That's a fee. You're getting paid that. You don't have to pay it back. But advances, which are more common, they are getting paid back through royalties anyway. It's almost like you're getting like an interest-free loan in that sense, right? But again, the setup can make a big difference. So one, it's like if you even have the advance in the first place, and then two, if you have it, what's the payment schedule like? Is it going to get paid at the end, or can you be like, hey, I want half of it now and I want half of it at the end. So I have something right now, whether it is studio time or you're going, paying rent or just life expenses. And then marketing funds too. That's another thing I've seen that sadly, like when people get way too stoked on a deal, they might get all jazzed on all these like marketing campaigns, and then the deal gets sent and then there's nothing about it in there. And then, the label might be like, yeah, well, of course we're going to market it. It's in our best interest to. But then I'm like, well, if you're actually promising this, then why don't we put this in? Whether it's a minimum $2,000 spend or a minimum $250,000 spend, whatever it may be. I'm like, if you are committing at least this much, let's put it in the deal then.
Do you find them willing to literally put their money where their mouth is, or do you get pushback on that?
I've seen it go both ways, honestly. Yeah. Like genuinely, I've seen times where they're like, we have no idea what the budget's like. And then I've seen other times where they're like, oh yeah, sure, that was an oversight. And I'm like, okay, Cool.
Yeah.
And then we put it
Yeah.
in.
Yeah. That's a good catch right there is like, oh, yeah, that's an oversight. Just ask. Right. And I think this is where a lot of young artists are just, again, kind of scared. Like I recently have had someone ask me like, hey, is it okay? Like, I don't want to seem annoying, like, is it okay? I'm like, yo, welcome to the music business. First off, this is how it works. You fucking negotiate, right? You ask for stuff. Hey, are you willing to do this? Are you willing to do that? We got to get over that, like, people pleasing part. And this is really where I come in as like a mindset coach. It's like that actually has to do with how do I see myself and my worth? Am I putting the label on a pedestal, and am I putting myself below them? Because then I seem like, oh, I'm being annoying by asking. And it's like, no. That's a thing inside of you that you got to conquer. You got to get over. You got to recognize like, hey, I am a valuable person. I'm a valuable artist. We all get a seat at the table, and we get to negotiate about things that work and things that don't work. And we get to ask. And then the worst thing is like, they're like, no, actually, we're not willing to do that. But at least you fucking asked. Right. And so playing small, no people pleasing, no bullshit. Like, come on, we're all adults, and this is just part of negotiation. So you got to ask, and you'd be surprised at how many times people would be like, oh yeah, sure. Okay. No problem. That was an oversight.
I can't tell you how much I agree with you on this. Honestly, it's really that simple. And I think like to add to that, I think that what people forget, like sometimes I have to break really bad news. Like being an attorney, like it's part of your job. Like you have to share the good news and the bad news. Like it's not all just like butterflies and rainbows. Like there's going to be times where there's going to be parts of a deal that might not be great, but you feel that that's like what you really badly want to do. So what do we do here? I think how you ask makes a huge difference. And like for me, that's a huge thing. I try to be friendly until I pretty much have to not be friendly, right? But like generally speaking, I'm like, I don't look at it as like, oh, we're all grabbing, we're all starving, we need to steal this pie away. I think that we can all be here together to grow together and to make things better together. So I'm like, I'm not looking at them as like they're your enemy. I'm like, dude, this is the team that's going to be pushing your track, helping you shape your brand. Who knows where it's going to go in the future. So we don't want to start off on a bad foot. So even when I have to give bad news, I'm just like, if you ask, just be respectful. It's like really, really simple. You might be, even if you're asking for something insane, just be like, hey, I feel like I want to do this. It's important for me. So like, what do you guys think? And I think if you're not being like a dick about it, then you can definitely make some progress. And, like you said, worst case scenario, like they can say no, but if you don't even ask, then you're not, there's no chance you're going to get it. If there's a 150 or 90% chance, now it's 0 because you didn't say anything.
Yeah, I love that, man. Something that I talk to my clients about is really seeing everything really as partnership. Just like what's the energy that you're coming into the relationship with in the first place. It's almost like dating. If you're coming into the relationship feeling like insecure or feeling not enough, like that's going to be felt. What's the energy that you're coming into this with? Is it that, oh, we all got to fight and fight to get as much percentage as we can, and you're coming in with aggressive energy? Like, well, that's going to set the tone. But a lot of artists are also coming in with what I was referring to earlier as kind of making themselves lesser than the label. Like, oh my God, I'm so lucky to be signed to this thing. And also thinking that, well, I'm going to sign to this label and they're going to take care of everything. They're going to do all the marketing. And it's like, no, this is your song. This is your release. And when you go out to shop for a label, what you're doing is you're looking for a partner. It's like, hey, I'm putting this song out. This is my song. I'm an artist. This is my career. I'm going to do everything I fucking can to make this the best release. And when I go out to shop around, I'm just looking for like, hey, who do I want to partner with? Do you want to get on board with me? Do we we're on the same team? Right. And so coming at it with that partnership kind of attitude that, we're all on the same team kind of attitude and energy, like it should be fun. It should be great. Even when it comes to the negotiations, like, hey, let's come from an abundance mindset. We're going to make a bunch of fucking money together. Right. Like the songs need to do great together. Yes. Like, hell yeah. What makes sense? What feels good for both of us? Right. And it literally 100%. It's a mindset and an energy and an attitude that you get to bring to the whole process.
Yes, I honestly I could not agree more. Like that's the thing. I think like in the industry too. I've said it before. It literally like one person can ruin an organization. I've seen that play out, and so that's the thing. Like you put yourself out there, you're being genuine, and you look at it as like, hey, well, let's grow together. And to an earlier point that you made, I think artists have to remember that in this day and age, you don't necessarily need a label as bad. You know what I mean? Like back in the day, like,
totally.
Decades ago, it might be much harder to scrape together the money to get you record in a studio and to understand how and where to place ads. But now, when people get super stoked about a deal and then I read it over and it's garbage, I like to, again, the message might be a horrible message, but I try to present it with, like positivity. I'll be like, look, I just want to let you know, like, we can try to push back on all these things and, but just so you're aware, if they're not going to slide and and this is the best that you're going to get or close to this, there's a lot you can do on your own or with your own team that, you're not going to be stuck with this.
Yeah.
So,
I think one of the big advantages of signing with labels, and there's only really a handful of them out there that have basically a brand, more than just like, hey, we can put a track up on Spotify and put a couple $100 into an ad. It's like, okay,
yeah, right.
Anybody can fucking do that. But you do have the Dimox out there or the Insomniac Records, where it's like, hey, if you affiliate with us and we develop a partnership together and we put out some music together, we got some shows going on. We can put you on those shows, a Dirty Bird or a Dimoc or, Anjuna Beats. So a lot of these labels, they also have really established brands that are throwing parties and throwing events. Do you ever see show terms like agreements for a certain amount of shows getting written into contracts, or is that more of like a handshake deal behind the scenes for some of those bigger brands?
It's funny because I've seen it kind of play out both ways, but I've seen shows built into deals before. Sometimes you have to be a little bit like lighter with the language. Like, for example, if you're going to be like dead set, super fixed on like the release date, like that, it is what it is. But with the shows, you might be like, we're going to make, let's say like reasonable efforts or best efforts to get you on like a label branded show within the next, 12 months or within the next 6 months, or like, 3 shows in the next 18 months, or whatever the combination ends up actually being. I feel like sometimes the tricky part with that is nailing it down with like specificity, because someone might be like, oh, well, I want to like open for this act. And it's like, well, what if they just ended a tour cycle? Or like, what if they've already like agreed who's going to be opening for them? You know what I mean? So sometimes you have to do it a little bit more loosey goosey, but I've definitely seen it like put in deals before. And in some situations, it really makes sense. And in some situations, it's actually beneficial for everybody, because I mean, the label's signing their up and comer and they have their other act that's going out on the road. It can definitely be beneficial to have them like out there, like cross promoting.
Totally. Let's go back to, signing record contracts. What are some other things that people should keep an eye out for?
Approval rights, and this is a broad statement, but and this can apply to a lot of different things. But there's times you might sign your track, and the marketing materials are up to the label, and the music video is up to the label, and all this stuff is up to the label. Well, what if you have certain political beliefs or certain religious beliefs, or just you don't want, you're very conservative in one area or another, and you don't want your music to be used in the most like sexual or violent scene in like a major network TV show, you know what I mean? But then you don't have the approval right. So the label might look at it like, oh, we're going to make so much money from this license. And you're like, well, this actually bothers me personally, or like tarnishes my brand. That's one of so many examples. Another thing might be like the music itself or the art. You might just like sign it over. It says it's theirs. It says that they tell you what to do. And then you're like, yeah, this is not the sound that I wanted. Like this isn't even meaningful to me anymore. Yeah. So like approvals, like generally speaking, I feel like when I'm on an artist side negotiation, one of the like broad things that I'll throw out there is just kind of like approvals all over the place and just kind of see what we can, push for. And worst case scenario, if like a label's being resistant, you can at the very least be like, all right, well, how about this? Like, this is some of the important stuff. Like, I at least want creative control on my masters. I at least want creative control over like third-party licenses and stuff. But if you guys want a little bit more flexibility on marketing, so be it. Because, in that sense, they probably won't even want to tarnish their own brand. So it's not like they're going to be putting like disgusting stuff out for marketing. We can hope. But again, get it in writing. That's what I say. Like, try to just get it all in writing.
Yeah. Good point. All right. What else should people look out for?
Oh man, there's so many. There's tricky accounting, creative accounting, as I like to call it, where, we're talking about recouping those advances, right? They're not just throwing you money. They're giving you money now based on money they're going to generate later from sales and streams. So I've seen a lot of times where like recoupment might be set up where as a label is like generating money, they might be like, okay, well, we're going to recoup this against the money that you would have made, but we're going to keep making money over here. And I've also seen times where like there might be a scenario where like recoupment can like push deals out. So I would say like the financial terms, if you see words in there that you don't understand, if you don't have the budget or the time or the care to hire an attorney, please, for the love of God, just Google it. At least Google it. At least talk to your homie that's also making music and be like, yo, what does this mean? To like figure out, because like at the end of the day, like there's a lot of love and positivity and relationships that go into this industry, but money is an important component on this planet. And so if you're going to be needing to pay for your expenses, you got to make sure that you understand how you're getting paid, especially if you owe a lot of masters or if you're going to be with a label for a long time or whatever.
One of the things that I remember seeing back when I was a manager was, I think it was called like, there's like reserves and then something about like packaging. I forget the actual term, but there was a certain amount of like money would be held back just in case, while this is like, they were referring to physical product. Like if this was when there were like CDs or records are being shipped to the record store from the actual, physical distribution plant, that the CDs might break. Right. And so they would reserve a certain amount of money for like what would ultimately be like broken CDs and records that just got fucked up along the process. And that was years ago. We're talking about just purely digital distribution now, but those terms would still be in a lot of these contracts.
I think the kind of the foundation to that is like having the money to account for the breakage, having to have the money to account for the loss. It's like, it's almost like an insurance policy, like a reserve against loss. You know what I mean? So, and like you said, it's not really relevant nowadays.
It doesn't really make sense anymore.
And then that reminds me too, another term that's outdated that stays in. I've seen labels actually get better about this, but not 100%, is mechanical royalties. So for a long time, the labels were like, hey, we're paying you advances and royalties and all this money on the record side. The mechanicals go to like the writer or publisher. And so like the artist, often having a stake on the publishing side, would accept that. They'd be like, okay, pay the mechanicals at 75%. We don't care. Well, again, now that it's all like, it's a tougher industry nowadays, right? It's shifted a lot. And the justification is just, it's not really real anymore. So sometimes just because it's been happening for a long time, it'll just say, 75% of the minimum statutory rate. And it's like, well, why don't you just ask for 100% of the statutory rate? And again, worst case scenario, they just say no. But that's one of those like leftover, like kind of fossils from like the old deal that keeps making its rounds.
And remind me what mechanical royalties are again.
Let's say back in the 90s, you're like pressing CDs. There's going to be like a fixed rate that's set statutorily by the federal law that's going to say like, okay, every time you print a CD, you have to give like X amount of cents to the publishers, like the writer. That's another thing too in the industry. I have to remind people there's two sets of rights in every track. You have what you hear, so like the master, the recording, then you have what you see, like the lyrics and the notes. So like the master side, the publishing side, the recording side, the composition side. And so like the mechanical royalties are meant when the record side is being distributed, there's always going to be an underlying side that you can't see. Every song is either going to have notes or beats or lyrics, right? And so whoever's in control of that side from the record side is going to get their little like tidbit per, like it was 7
cents per, it was like 7.65 cents or something per CD, right?
And then now I honestly, I don't remember what it was. I remember 9.1. 9.1 is definitely a relevant number for a certain time. But nowadays,
Inflation.
That's the thing. The CDs, it's like these days now it's just a minuscule number, decimal for like streaming. So they still pay it. It's just been
it still applies to streaming. That they still get it is the publishing owners, the people that own the composition side, getting a percentage of the streaming sales, or the streaming royalties on the master side.
Yeah, it's like it's basically like because you're reproducing the owner of that composition's like work in a recorded form, like you're paying them to be able to do that.
Yeah. So if this is going above your head and you're literally like, what the fuck are these guys talking about? Well, one, I think that shows where and no offense, but this shows where your level of music business education is. And the truth is like, this is some complicated shit. I used to teach, I taught the music business class at Icon Collective. This was always the class that everyone was just like, what? Like it's hard stuff to understand, but it's good to understand. It's good to understand, like, this is your business. You are a business owner. It's important to understand all of the ins and outs of how your business and how your industry works. Right. So I would highly recommend to go maybe on YouTube and, like research, like, what are mechanical royalties? What is the difference between a master and a composition? How does publishing work? Like, do a little bit of education, do a little bit of a deep dive into this, just so you can wrap your head around, what do all these numbers mean when you're getting your royalty statements from a record label, or when you're getting your royalty statements from Spotify, right? Just so that you have a basic understanding of it. Do you have any suggestions for resources of like good music business resources that break down some of these really complicated subjects in like a digestible way?
It's so funny because my music law class in school and my DIMMOC internship, they like happened at the same time, and both of them told me to get the same book. And so I was like, this is perfect, two birds, one stone. So the classic Donald Passman, All You Need to Know About the Music Business, that was like the first thing that was recommended to me from both of those.
Is that still relevant though? I remember that was like
they're still updating it.
Page like thick ass book. I remember reading some of it. I was just like, it's kind of dense. There's got to be I'm talking about like a YouTube infographic, like music business for dummies that breaks shit down. Is there anything out there like that
I don't know if we will ever reach a point in human civilization, especially when it comes to like the music publishing and like as if it's already not enough. I mean, it's like you have the record and then the publishing side, and then you have like the writer share and the publisher share.
Yeah.
All these little like breakdowns. I'm like, will we ever have a point in history where it's going to be clear?
Where it's simple? Yeah, probably not.
Yeah, probably not.
Fair enough.
But I mean, that book, they keep updating it. So I will say, for what it's worth, though, like, yeah, I don't know if I would just embark on just busting through every last page of that. I think that there's more shorter, digestible kind of tidbits. There's definitely like on YouTube. YouTube is a great resource. I feel like for a lot of different people in the music industry, from whether you're trying to figure out how to do something in Ableton to whether you're trying to figure out what a legal term is. And that's again
University.
also
YouTube University, baby. That's where it's at for sure.
So I mean, like that, and like I'm hoping to be one of those resources. Like that's why I'm putting out more tidbits and sharing stuff with people where I'm like, I want to give overviews and explanations and kind of familiarize people with this stuff. But then that's the other thing too. I love talking to people. So if someone's like, hey, I watched your video, but like this, I still don't know what the hell this means. That's why I'm like, just talk to me. Like I love talking to people. And even when people like, I feel like people feel like kind of pressure. They're like, well, if you're talking to someone, like, does that mean they're offended if I don't hire them? I'm like, no, I'm like, we're in this community together. Like, I don't just sit in here all day and like shut all the doors and just read contracts. Like I go to shows, I hang out with people. I have a rental business that I do on the side. Like I have short-term rentals that I offer, and like my businesses tie into each other. And that when like people are in town for a tour, well, I'm not just like, I only talk to you on email or phone. I'm like, come here. You have a place to stay. We can go to the show together. We can get dinner together. I want to get to know you. I want to talk to you. I want to know, why the hell are you even making music? You know what I mean? Or like, what's next for you? And so I want to remind people that like to like reach out and talk to people because if you're research on your own through like books or YouTube or whatever, you're like still not getting it, talk to people. I think it's a beautiful industry to connect, and the relationships I think mean so much.
Yeah, 100%, man. I think that's a good segue into when should somebody hire a lawyer? Like, when do you think that that's like important to do? In what situations, what types of contracts do you feel like it would be advisable to really reach out to a professional and have them handle it? So my very biased answer is as soon as possible, as soon as you can, because you might enter into a record deal that you don't understand, and you're like, your career is just starting to blossom, and you don't realize how constrained you're going to be. Not every deal is like that. I mean, sometimes that's one of the, I guess, frustrating parts of my job, where it sounds like all doom and gloom and scary, like labels trying to steal everything. It's not always that way. Sometimes like labels are also realizing the landscape, and some will pre-adjust. Well, they'll send you stuff that right off the bat is already more balanced out because they want to be known for like fostering that community mindset.
But for the situations that that's not happening, I always advise sooner rather than later. And sometimes, again, even if you're very early on in your career, you can just talk to attorneys and just ask them for their opinion. Like they might look over a deal and be like, hey, I'm going to charge you this much to actually go in depth. But I can tell you, like, just on an initial glance, like, this isn't the worst thing I've ever seen or whatever.
Yeah.
It's just
Sure.
attorneys always have to be careful too. Like I even have to say this now. I feel like I have this pressure. I feel like always kind of that's saying like you have to tell people like, hey, what I'm saying is not legal advice. We are so heavily kind of like regulated and monitored. No, I guess not monitored, but just regulated, right? And so like on the end of all my videos, I'm putting like this is not legal advice.
So we'll just jump in right now and say, everybody that's listening, this is not official legal advice. This is just a podcast of two dudes talking about the music business, okay? The legal disclaimer. We're throwing that in there.
Always putting that in my videos. This is not legal advice. We're heavily regulated, so just don't want to mess anything up. Somebody sees the video, they go sign a deal, and then they come and they're like, hey, man, I relied on this that you posted on the video, and now my whole music industry career has got down the toilet.
You ruined my life. Yeah.
It's all over. Why?
So, okay, look, let's talk about, I want to share a little story. This was my very first day when I actually, I worked for the manager of the Black Eyed Peas for a little while. A little fun music business history for me and my journey in my career. I started my career at Capitol Records, and I got very close with David Guetta's camp. During that time, we had David Guetta. That was awesome. David Guetta produced and worked with the Black Eyed Peas. He produced I Got a Feeling. He produced a bunch of stuff with them and will.i.am. And so I got introduced to the Black Eyed Peas camp, and I got hired by the manager over there. And that was awesome. That was like, the cool thing is that also he was partnering with Pasquale from Insomniac, and they had this idea of launching the Discovery Project. So I got to be a part of literally what's still running now. Which kind of also went on to become Insomniac Records. So really, really cool opportunity back then. Now, I remember my very first day on the job, my very first day in the office. I got thrown into a situation where one of the guys on our roster, he was a producer, and he had, they would just pop in the studio and they would make music with other producers. There was another producer that he collaborated with, and I think like Fergie was on the track or something, and a handful of producers and singers, songwriters, everybody was involved in making this song. Nobody signed anything or agreed to anything about the song. All of a sudden, the song gets placed in a makeup commercial, and there was like $100,000. There was a sync deal. Now we're in a situation where the producers, managers are all fighting over who's getting what. And that was a very fun first day on the job. What do you recommend for, when you're going into the studio? A lot of people don't want to mess up the creative energy, the vibe. It's like, I just want to come and create. So like, let's not talk about splits and stuff like that. Yet, sometimes when you don't talk about splits, all of a sudden there's a bunch of money on the table and managers and lawyers are all fighting over it. Right. So how do you recommend artists go about finding that balance of, being in the studio and being creative, but also like having these necessary music business discussions, especially over splits?
Well, I think that, again, kind of like with the hiring an attorney sooner rather than later, I think that the sooner in the process that you can jump into that, the better. And again, too, one thing I will throw out there, I tell people a lot of the time, I'm like, this is a creative, fun industry. So if you need a bad guy to blame, like, I'm like, just blame me, man. Just say our lawyer is the one that's saying like, oh, we got to go change this term. We got to do that. Because I'm like, you're supposed to be out there like creating, right?
Yeah.
Like bouncing, like, you're not supposed to be sitting there squabbling over 15 versus 25%. But yeah, generally speaking, I think you can help everybody to get the contracts in place sooner rather than later. If going into the studio with the like preset splits is too stressful, then at least talk about it as soon as you can after, because like I have to play a lot of cleanup. My job is a lot of cleanup where somebody like situations like what you just said are actually too common. Yeah. Unfortunately. Yeah. Where like people might like they release a track, they have a good vibe with the label or the other artist that has a good vibe with the label, and then the song comes out, it does really well, and this guy that might have taken $1,000 advance or a $5,000 advance, if you talked about this 6 months ago, now they see that there was a makeup brand or a movie studio or whatever that wants it, or now you see the streams are just blowing up. I mean, going from 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures. Now, what would have been like a $5,000 advance budget is now going to be a $50,000 advance or a $100,000 advance. So as a label or as a like hiring artist, because you could be an independent artist that hires a vocalist that this happens to, right? I think it's for that situation, it's beneficial to have it in place sooner. But honestly, it can be beneficial for the other side as well, for like the person who gets brought on or hired to do that, or like the vocalist or producer that contributes to the label or the main artist project. Because if you don't have the contract in place, there might be squabbles over splits there. They might not pay you. They might be like, well, you never signed a contract, so how are we supposed to know what your accounting statements are supposed to look like? So it can, I think that's a use. It can be useful for all the parties to figure it out sooner rather than later, and not have to fight over cleanup after the track is already out or already licensed.
Yeah. I just Googled this real quick because I just remembered there's an app that Create Music Group made called Splits. It's basically an app that in a very simple way, you can just have everybody log into and just put in the percentage of splits right there, and it's like everybody signs it electronically, and it's like it's all done in like 2 seconds rather than having to draft up a big contract or anything. So check out the Splits app by Create Music Group. I'm gonna hit up their owner, actually. I'm manifesting this right now, speaking it out loud. I used to know Alex. It's been a long time, but they're incredible. They do huge like YouTube monetization and have a few big studios. Anyways, check out the Splits app. That can help. And like, yeah, it's just important. You got to have that conversation at some point. So yeah, have it sooner than later. Do it before there's a bunch of money on the table. That will usually help and save
100%.
managers and lawyers a lot of stress, because I remember that being a very stressful first day on the job. That was not fun.
I bet. Well, yeah, I mean, like that it happens, and then it just sucks, because if you talked about it beforehand, like, right, there might be a little bit of, like buyer's remorse, like, maybe we should have asked for more or whatever, but it pales in comparison to like the nasty conversations that you kind of see come into play like after the fact.
Yeah. And something I used to advise a lot as well was that, a lot of times we're doing these handshake deals, or you might have a conversation, and like, let's say you negotiate something in conversation. It's I'm going to, pay you X amount of money to do this, or we're going to split the royalties 50-50. And it might be a verbal conversation that you have. Mm-hmm. I would usually advise to then follow up with an email and put it in email and say, hey, like, based off what we talked today, like this is what we said, and email it to them, and then like have them email it back, just so that there was basically a paper trail. Is that legally binding at all? Or does it actually, like, if there's like an email that you had sent and like, hey, look, you emailed me back, we've got it right here. If you were to go to court per se, like, is that email legit and legally binding, or does it have to like really be on a contract written out and signed with a pen?
Let me throw 2 things back at you. 1, it depends. But 2, generally speaking, something is better than nothing. And it's so funny because your process, that is exactly what I do or ask people to do. Even if we're not talking about like binding negotiation, like contract terms, for something as simple as like, somebody might give me a call and have like a consult, or I'm talking to a longstanding client, they have a new project or whatever. That advice, I think, is phenomenal. To just get it in writing, because there's certain situations that certain things can become binding, or at least serve as evidence to be used. But like the shortest version of it is get it in writing, and exactly like you just laid out. I love to do that as well. And I usually tell people too, because sometimes it can be a little awkward, you know what I mean? Like asking for that. Yeah. So I don't even like it to reach the awkward phase. Like if I'm getting to the end of a consult, I'll just tell someone like, hey, by the way, it was great to talk to you. I'm going to shoot over my rates and, like what kind of the estimates that I have in mind. So I'm going to send that to an email. So just so you have it, and then you get back to me, review at your leisure. And if you have questions or whatever, let me know. So get rid of the awkwardness, and then you're actually like putting your money where your mouth is. You're actually like backing up your word. You're not just saying something and then you do a project for them, and then later you're like, you send the bill and they're like, what the fuck is this? Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. I'm just realizing how much of this it's music business knowledge, like just knowing the nuts and bolts of the math, right? And how things work and what industry standards are. There's that side of it. And then there really is this whole other side of it, which is just about personal communication, right? Being able to have these conversations, being able to negotiate, being able to have people like you so that they want to work with you and they want to they want to find a fair deal. There's like just the personal side of it is so important as well. And I think that that's where having a good lawyer on your team can really make sense. You know, I think one, you might not want to have those conversations yourself. Right? I might not want to be the one negotiating all of these things. I want to be the artist. I just want to fucking create. I just want to make music. I don't want to have to worry about that. Like talk to my, like, here's my lawyer. And also, you know, the lawyer's probably going to be way more trained and versed in having those conversations, you know, being able to negotiate, having good relationships with people. It is making more and more sense to me, like why an artist would want to, you know, really just be like, hey, like you handle this. This is your wheelhouse. This is your zone of genius. Let me focus on mine. If somebody was interested in working with you, I'm sure a lot of people are listening to this right now and being like, damn, yeah, I actually do need a lawyer. I should have somebody looking over my stuff. How can people contact you and reach out?
So I have my website. It's just my first and last name. And I have a very frustrating name. Sometimes I'm going to spell it out. It's ArtaMajd.com. It's my first name, last name. I also like my Instagram and YouTube, like it's all pretty consistently branded. It's just my first name, last name. I'm pretty easy to find. And you know, I just tell people, I'm like, connect with me if you have a question, or if you want to just follow me just to see what I'm talking about. Maybe in 6 months or a year, you or a friend might have something. But I don't want people to be scared or worried about reaching out or be like, oh God, this guy's going to try to sell me something like immediately. I don't operate that way. I've seen lawyers, especially in like more, I want to say, kind of like high stakes areas, let's say like criminal law, where like I've heard of like, you know, where people will like call a lawyer and they're like, oh my God, if you don't send me this retainer right now, and if you don't get me on your case, like you're going to have you're going to go to jail and your record's going to be ruined and your whole life is over.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude, like what kind of a sick way is that? Like I sleep really well at night because I like to be straightforward with people. And I just tell them, I'm like, these are my thoughts. This is my estimate as far as costs. You know, there's no one size fits all scenario. So I just tell people, I'm like, talk to me. I'm not going to pressure you into it. I'll give you my assessment and try to help you out. And if I can't help you out, again, we might end up becoming friends or colleagues, or we might just end up connecting down the road when you or somebody else might need the help.
Yeah, you might be staying at the rental property at some point, grilling up steaks and drinking a beer together one of these nights. Who knows?
Oh man, it gets so hot here. I'm in Arizona. I'm licensed in California, I'm in Arizona. But then when it's summertime, the grill gets hot. Those steaks, you get that sizzle on there. Love that.
So good, man. Well, I'll be sure to put your Instagram and your website in the show notes. If anybody's looking for a good lawyer, you know where to go. Hit up Arta. He'll take care of you. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I know we could do fucking 4 more of these because there's so much deep stuff to go into. There's so much stuff. We even talk about management contracts for someone that's being faced with a management contract. There's so many other clauses and things to go in there. So one, everybody go, you know, learn as much as you can, educate yourself, go to YouTube University, but also, tap into hitting up some professionals and having, you know, people really like walk you through that process. You never know what you're signing, you know, unless you're like really, really well versed in this stuff. So go hit up Arta. He'll take care of you. Thanks so much.
Appreciate you. Thank you so much for having me on. This is the time flew by. I would love, I talk for hours, but I appreciate the opportunity and I appreciate being here. And yeah, like I said, like I appreciate you and anyone else out there that I can help and be a resource to. I would love to do that.